So, Alex, it's 2016. Lattice has just launched. You are employee number three, and you guys need to go to market, or you are or on the market already. So, what was the initial landscape? What was your initial assumption of like which product you're going to lead with? What was the opening, the opportunity, and what was the initial go-to-market strategy?
Yeah. So when I first joined Lattice was actually a goal tracking company, and it started with OKRs, and it was this idea of how can you build kind of operational excellence at a team. And when that first summer when we were trying to sell Lattice, we noticed when we were selling the OKR product, teams would probably start internal infighting, right, trying to align all their different goals. But while we were talking to customers, we kind of kept hearing this trend that was coming up in a kind of adjacent space around continuous performance management. And there was this big shift in HR at the time where people were moving away from the traditional annual performance review that kind of sucked for everyone involved, and moving towards this model of continuous feedback, right? How can you give feedback in the moment when something happens? And then so we pivoted the product pretty quickly and started building, product towards that goal. And so later that year, we launched kind of a lightweight performance review product. Then we built feedback, and kind of other things to help enable managers to have those conversations with employees. And there was some, like, BetterWorks was the big OKR provider at the time. They were doing big kind of enterprise customers. But there was a company called Reflective who was doing this kind of more continuous performance management stuff and kind of led the industry at the time. And which we started to kind of build actually a similar product to them. The big difference, though, was design. We really believed that you needed to, build something that employees and managers love to use, not just build for the HR persona. So that's kind of the early story of how we built the product and tried to
Hmm.
differentiate it.
So that idea of continuous performance review, you weren't really thinking about that. So you learned that through your sales demos, your pitches.
Yeah, basically, it's like our CEO and sales rep, and then me, kind of in the corner overhearing calls. But we would talk to people, and they'd like start fighting about the OKR thing, and you could just tell this, like, they weren't wanting to buy your software; they were kind of fighting. And then you would hear them say, "Oh, but we have this other adjacent problem." And so yeah, it was all customer calls, and then there's also a lot of market research and articles that were
Hmm.
happening at the time. So I'd look at like Deloitte's HR tech landscape report, and you could see that this emerging trend was coming.
So you decided to go down the simplicity, ease of use. It's a beautiful experience to use type of route. So the competitors that you mentioned, so were they more like an enterprisey, clunky, selling to HR and
Yeah. So they were, yes, like they were trying to appeal to a bigger enterprise, segment, and naturally there's a lot of customization that needs to happen in those segments. So that I think the experience just was not the same. And the interesting thing about the HR tech landscape is you have these direct competitors, like I mentioned, Reflective, 15.5, at the time. But then there's all these HRS providers, right? Your core HR folks who also, they offer payroll and benefits and system of record and kind of all the core HR stuff. And then they kind of did what Lattice did, this more performance management stuff or employee engagement, but they just didn't invest in it. It wasn't a core competency of theirs, and so it lacked some of the customization. It lacked the user experience, and so we were able to kind of start to kind of steal customers from or partner with them. Is probably a
Mhm.
better way to say it.
So then you were a small startup. There were bigger players already there, probably deeper pockets at a time. What was your plan to win, and were you planning to get the word out about Lattice, and what worked and what didn't?
Yeah. So on the product side, it was how can we make it as easy as possible to use while giving HR flexibility to kind of make a process that they want, and that kind of modular but easy to use approach, I think, really worked well in the market. And then on the marketing side, honestly, we experimented with a lot of different channels. Right, I was trying to find a silver bullet, like can I just dump money into Facebook ads and grow this thing? But that definitely did not work. And so I invested a lot into building a brand, building a community. Like my overall kind of approach in guiding light for Lattice was how can I make the marketing team almost like a little media company that operates inside of Lattice, where there's a single advertiser, and that's Lattice. And so one
And
of
so
the
tell me
yeah,
specifically then what did that look like, the brand
yeah.
building in the media machine?
So one of the first things we did was actually interviews like this. We would have Jack sit down with heads of HR who were not customers of ours, like the head of people at Reddit, the head of people at Asana. We would do a really high produced video, go into the offices, film a long thing, and then do a lot of video snippets and promote those over social. And it did this kind of wonderful thing for the brand because people started to associate Lattice with these much bigger brands. And I think people thought that they were customers at the time, but they actually weren't. So we really focused on just how do we engage the HR community. And then funny enough, they all became customers. So in some ways, it was the best way to start an enterprise sales cycle.
Right, right. People do podcasts because they want, like, hey, that person should know that I exist, so they invite them on the podcast. So it was like a similar play. Like, we want these companies to know we exist.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. And so, 2016, you were, continuous performance review company, but then rather quickly, you guys started to ship new products, additional products in every 6 to 12 months or something.
Yeah. So the big thing that happened, I think the time was September 2018. We launched engagement surveys. So in the past, it was you had a performance management provider and a performance data set, and then you had your engagement data set, right? These are the surveys that people send out to a company, and do you like working here? Are the people, and then they kind of have an aggregate total to give a feeling of employee sentiment. And we were the first company to combine the two. So now, for the first time ever, you could answer questions like, are my top performers happy? Because we could see who your top performers were from the performance side of things. And then we could see happiness data from the engagement side of things. And so that was, I think, a huge pivotal turning moment for Lattice. And it changed the competitive landscape, because what happened was all of the other point solutions started trying to catch up. And so you had Culture Amp, who's Lattice's biggest competitor today. They started on the engagement side. They were really strong on the engagement side of things. But then, 6 months or a year later, they actually bought a performance company to start competing with us. And then you had Reflective trying to build their own engagement product. So there's this interesting game of catch up. And today, you really can't be a performance company without offering engagement too. And we rebranded it as people management. Because we really thought about how can we help companies, with their management, how can we help them build high performing and engaged teams? That's what it became all about.
So tell me more about the product strategy there. Shipping new products, expanding your suite. Was it to increase, increase the net revenue earned by client per year, so expansion? Was it to attract a new type of customer, so you're expanding the market? Or was it about winning competitive deals that they have these features, so we also need to have these features?
It was honestly a little bit of all of those things. It was like, okay, like a big story with Lattice was how do we increase our ACV, right? We had started in an SMB segment and wanted to move a market. And so a lot of our marketing changed to, okay, how do we do more ABM style marketing instead of just inbound? And that was a thing that was happening. And then and then the product was another element of that, of, okay, how can we add, if we're charging $9 now per seat, can we charge $12 per seat? And all those things were this kind of big plan to how do we, basically get more out of our existing customers. And then there's also, it helped our customers, right? These were things that they wanted, and it made their lives easier. It helped them consolidate systems. They got better data. They got better information. And so there's a real benefit to that. I think it's the classic like bundling, unbundling thing in software, where we had started in a really unbundled space. We were a point solution. And then now Lattice's product strategy is going more towards bundling, where there's more of a front end platform that we're building.
And then in Forbes featured you as one of the most innovative companies. So how did that come about? And was that PR fueling you more business? Was it something you engineered, or it just happened?
Yeah, try to remember. Like I had an interesting relationship with PR because I had this media approach, right? I wanted to build our own media company and own our own distribution, our own earn network. So it was something that you would work on on the side. And today there's a real PR function and there's someone leading it, and we have PR agency. But it was something that like me and Jack, the CEO, would kind of work on occasionally. And I think the Forbes one was honestly just networking through our VCs and doing an application and kind of going through the process. A lot of the award stuff is filling out the applications and the process, and then they look at the quality of the work and they make a call there.
Gotcha. So, you guys launched on Product Hunt. I've done Product Hunt numerous occasions, being number one, daily number one. Doesn't really do much for the business. It's like nice juju, good
Yeah.
feeling for the team. So, any of that stuff, did any of it have any real business impact to win awards?
Um, the biggest business impact, which I think is maybe even more important than leads, is from a talent and recruiting perspective.
Mm.
You get the internal energy, as you said, like everyone is so excited. It's amazing to see Lattice, like, on the NASDAQ, like, in Times Square. It's just like so exciting. And you just feel the buzz and energy in the office and in Slack. But then externally, right, it helps with recruiting. And to make these companies work, you need to get really good people. And my team would always joke, because one of my favorite sayings was, "Oh, we're a real company now,"
Oh,
and
yes,
that kept happening, and I keep saying it still. But like, you have these moments where it's like an inflection point where, holy shit, we are a real company, and like each
totally.
of those awards make it happen.
Yeah. It's like at first you have startup T-shirts because, like, are you a real startup if
Yeah,
if you don't have T-shirts, and then name on the building, and yeah, all these things.
exactly.
Um, so you mentioned you got into quite a bit of feature war with the competitors. Catch up, who's copying whom. And if you look at any mature SaaS category, there's very little objective difference between the tools. Everybody has every feature. So, what's your view here? And how was Lattice thinking about this on the inside? Was it that you doubled down on a particular segment of the market that others maybe weren't so interested in? Did you have a particular use case or a 10x feature for a particular subset that others weren't building? What was the product based differentiation play?
Yeah, it was a very interesting and debate, sort of conversation internally. Where it basically settled was, we need to focus on our strengths and double down on our strengths. And for us, it was performance, right? We had Culture Amp, who was a really good competitor of ours. They had this amazing engagement product. It would take years, honestly, for us to catch up from a product perspective to get there. And so we looked at it and said, okay, how can we really outcompete them on our strength, which was performance management, and this idea of continuous performance management, which we believed was more important, right? You don't just work at a company to sit around and be happy. You work at a company to achieve some end goal. Whether you are a hedge fund and you want to make money, or you're a nonprofit and you want to end poverty, you want to have a high performing team that's going to help you kind of reach this end goal. And so we thought, from a marketing message standpoint, that resonated more with everybody, right? A CEO wants that, the HR person wants that, and managers, and so on and so forth. And so that was what our product positioning became more about. That's what we focus on from a product perspective too. Not to say we weren't building engagement and trying to catch up, but from an investment perspective, we wanted to make sure we kept that lead.
Mhm. And many people have said product based differentiation is going away. David Cancel 2017 and so on. So while you're building these features and trying to maintain your leadership position in certain areas, were you also actively thinking about moats? Building moats. I don't know whether it's switching costs or any other type of moat that would make you win the feature war or the product war.
Yeah. So on the product side of things, I think the moat was just, how do all these different products connect, right? And if we can get your performance data and your engagement data and your development data in one place, and then the way it's all interconnected, in a native product, is way more powerful than if you're trying to connect it through a bunch of APIs and show up in a Looker dashboard, and we're able to show you more interesting insights about your business. And so we believe that as we kind of build more product surface area, it brings more value to the customer. So that was kind of on the product side, I think, the moat. On the marketing side of things, our moat became our community. And so we had built this community, Resources for Humans. And it started in a Slack channel, and then evolved into a bunch of different other kind of properties. Newsletter. We had a huge conference, both in person and virtual. We would have lots of other little events, and we have, I think, 11,000 HR folks in the community. And it's not an HR. I mean, it's not a user community. It's not a Lattice community. We actually don't even let our sales team in there, even though people are talking about like potentially buying Lattice. And so over time, that community, that kind of media company idea, really helped to build up our our brand in the market. And I think that's a hard thing to copy because we are becoming this kind of destination for HR just to learn. Like you don't have to buy Lattice to get access to all these things. These are all
Mhm.
free for the community.
Is that community still on Slack?
Yeah, still 11,000 people in there, and it's going, it's good. You know, like we still we're still on the free version of Slack, so it can only scale so far. So that's why we've have took it in other places, and I think it'll be interesting to see where they take it next.
Yeah. A lot of companies are trying to build community as their moat and brand as their moat. And we see a lot of ghost towns, a lot of communities that, not exactly dead, but not quite alive either, some kind of zombie status. So, what do you think Lattice did specifically about the community building that it got right? Was it that there was no existing community for these people to hang out? Was that?
So there was existing communities, and some of our competitors actually had them. I think there was a couple interesting learnings along the way. The first was when we first launched it, we tried to make it really like an executive level community, right? Like how do we get CHROs in there? And it completely tanked because we found that the executives did not have the same sort of time in their life. And so we relaunched it as kind of a general HR community, and it started to really take off. And I think the best thing we did was make it feel very like VIP. So you had to apply. You couldn't just join. There was an application form. You had to explain why, and that was really helpful. And sort of getting the right people in there and kind of creating this aura around it. The other thing was like continual growth, because I think what happens with the community is a lot of people get into a Slack channel, they forget about it, they leave, then they kind of maybe come back, and so we were constantly adding new people into there, and then we built it into our entire process. So in an outbound sales email, someone's like, "No, I don't want to buy Lattice," or "I'm not interested." We said, "Oh no, no worries. Like join our community," and it was a way to stay in touch. And then we really kept it alive by doing things outside of the Slack channel. So it became not just about, okay, are you posting in there? Because it gets really messy quickly. It becomes, are you engaging with our newsletter? Are you coming to our events? So on and so forth.
Things that I've also learned about Lattice is in articles, there's a lot of focus on the people, the talent inside the companies, the culture. And of course, every company says that we have great culture and great people.
Yeah.
What were some specific things that really had an impact on attracting talent and then empowering, building a great culture, or how that contributed to the massive success?
Yeah, it's Lattice is like a interesting culture company because we sell HR software, right? So it is like I think it is more top of mind than probably most companies. Like the kind of joke I always give is it's like it's hard for me to have a bad one-on-one with a person who writes articles about how to have a good one-on-one. And so it's this sort of like always top of mind accountability around culture. And I think it also self-selects for the type of people who join the company, right? These are people who are really interested in building a modern culture that is really focused around people, right? And I think we believe that as business has kind of moved online, it becomes more about the people. It becomes more about the information in people's brains. That's where the creative and the kind of the next generation of great companies is really built off talent and kind of creating those spaces. And I think the thing that I think we've done a little bit differently is it's not about benefits. It's not about ping pong tables and snacks and all of that stuff. It's about giving something that people really want to work on and something they believe in, and giving people the ability to grow. Like we really believe in the ability and helping people grow their career and giving them skills and kind of all of that different,
Mhm.
training around
Do you
it.
think that was different than, let's say, your competitors, Culture? They did not do any of those things, or?
I'm not sure, to be honest. Like I think, yeah, I was never in those companies. I think they maybe, Culture specifically is an Australian company, so I think they maybe looked at it from a, probably a different viewpoint because of kind of that international side of things, and I think that made them probably more complex because uh, they were bigger than us for a while, and they had way more offices. So I'm sure their culture was, probably more like today, where it's like a remote culture.
Mhm. So what also happens in high growth or saturated categories, that eventually all the companies start saying very similar things. They're same benefits and same good market message. And so if you're new to the category, you're not a category connoisseur, and you're competing this offerings on a surface level, website against website. It's very hard to tell them apart. So, what was Lattice's like go to market and marketing message early on, and how has it evolved while still differentiating against the competition?
Yeah, it was a very frustrating journey as like you continually update your messaging and then you go look at other people's websites, 3 4 months later, and it's like, oh, this is vaguely familiar. I think we our approach generally with competitor and messaging was we would keep an eye on it, but really just our messaging came from within us. And so our early messaging was performance management employees love, because it was a sort of counterintuitive thing. You would stand at a conference booth and an HR person would come and laugh at it because they'd like, no employee loves performance management. And so that was kind of a fun twist on an old school message. And that was kind of, let's say, phase one of Lattice. But then as we expanded our product from performance and doing engagement, we changed it to like develop engaged and high performing teams. So that change really was about, okay, how do we marry these two concepts of performance and engagement in one place? So, and then you'll notice that all the competitors, as they change their product set, they kind of converge on a similar messaging with, switching out a word here or there. And so what we really tried to do was probably two things. One was design. Like we think we could outcompete people with our brand design. And so we did some interesting kind of look and feel on our website. So at the very least, even if the words are the same, the feeling is really different. And so we come up with this cool visual language of like real live models, real life people, right? Because we're a people company, but marrying it with like CGI kind of backgrounds and stuff. And so it wasn't just the kind of sea of like illustrations that you see on most SaaS websites or just like, shitty stock photography. It was kind of this blended CGI plus people design. And I think that helped us stand out a little bit. And then I think the other way we were able to innovate was, how can we, even if the messages are the same, like if you put it in different places or unique places, that's really interesting. And so we would put the message in billboards or, we actually wrote a book recently. And so it's like our messaging is getting out there into different ways. And then what's interesting, and actually as I bring up the book, is our messaging just became more complicated or more robust over time. So another big concept we talk a lot about is people strategy. Like we believe companies need to have a people strategy in the same way that they have a sales and marketing and product strategy. And we don't think that's talked enough about. And so that's why, one of the reasons why we wrote a book to encourage more companies to do that.
How did the target audience, the target market change as you started growing? So you said you targeted SMBs early on. Were you going up market? Did you have to abandon the earlier market and then go upstream? And so what happened there?
Yeah. So we were moving up market, and I think we didn't abandon it. So today, Lattice really serves companies between, let's say, 25, 50 employees all the way up to 3,000. So it's a pretty big market. And what happened was we basically optimized our go to market. We have, our sales teams go after different segments, but the persona definitely really changed, right? And so in the bottom end of the market, right, you have a persona that I like to think of as like an accidental HR person, right? Somebody who is kind of getting stuck with all the HR. It could be the founder or the CEO. It could be the office manager. And there's a point of time in a company where everyone's like, I need a performance review. I need to do this thing. And you're like, oh God, how do I do that? And then you scramble and figure it out online. And so these people want to be told what to do. They want to be say, here's the best way to do performance management. And they want your product and your services to kind of guide them through it. But then as you move a market, it becomes, the HR org becomes more professional. It becomes bigger. You have HR people who really know what they are doing, right? And they want to implement it their way, right? They have a belief of how they think performance management or employee engagement should be run at the company. And so your software needs to be flexible enough for them to be able to run their program. And so you kind of, it's like more prescriptive early on, more customized later.
Hmm. What's Lattice's marketing like now? Where's the growth coming from? How much is like paid acquisition versus like SEO versus brand content, like media, like videos
Yeah.
and things like that?
So like Lattice early on was all inbound, right? We were like, let's say 75% inbound driven. And so a lot of it was coming from word of mouth or organic search, a lot of things from our brand and community, right? People, like, I think of it as a lot of like indirect marketing where people join our community, they read an ebook, they take an action, and then they eventually kind of come back to demo when they are ready. Over time, we've been trying to shift the mix from inbound to outbound because we know that enterprise buyers don't quite buy in the same way, and we started to have more efficiency kind of in our sales team as well. And so that's an interesting kind of thing. In a lot of ways, I think of it as like an alley oop, right? So marketing creates a campaign, creates an awesome conference, and then is really working closely with the sales team to follow up on those different leads. And we're doing a lot more of, I think of it as like scaled account-based marketing, where we have, let's say, 10 to 20,000 accounts that we want to go after. And the tactics look a little bit different, right? Like direct mail became a big part of our toolkit, where we're sending out mass direct mail to different folks, start the conversation, get it going, and then pairing that with outbound sales emails or so on and so forth.
Lattice has raised quite a bit of money, and so that means that also investor expectations about certain milestones are probably pretty ambitious. So, considering the numbers you need to hit so that everybody would be happy, what kind of bets is Lattice making in terms of product, also marketing?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like, I think every year, like every November, December, you look at the annual plan for the following year. Like, oh my God, that is insane. How are we going to do it? I remember, like especially when it starts getting into like $1 million months and multi-million-dollar months, you're like, where? How are we going to possibly do this? And knock on wood, we've been able to do it. And I think it's being pretty bold and ambitious. So on the product side of things, it was really scaling up the engineering team, right? And building out pods. And we hired an awesome VP of engineering, and our COO actually changed and is now a chief product officer and president. And he's leading that. And so there's a massive product investment because ultimately we believe if we can build the best product out there, the rest will kind of fall into place. So it's like spending just a lot of money on R&D and being really aggressive. And then on the marketing side of things, it is like, how can we just up level? Like, basically every year we kind of did the same things, but we just up leveled the ambition and scale of it. And so, back in 2016, I was struggling to do maybe a webinar every month, and I could get like 100 people to show up at that webinar. But then last year during COVID, and there was a long journey to get here, we had a conference with 42,000 people RSVP, 22,000 attended. We had Trevor Noah as a headline speaker. You just scaled up the ambition, and that cost a lot of money, right? Like, we spent money to get him, we spent money on ads to get those people, but just the scale and the ambition. And over time, my budget would increase and increase and increase, and you just have to be able to think bigger and bigger. And you have to do things that you're uncomfortable or unknown. Like, we spent money on billboards and things like that without knowing whether it would quite work. And the trick with all of it, though, was I had a really good relationship with our CEO and founder, Jack. We were able to really mind meld and agree on different things, especially on these more, brandy marketing things that are harder to track the ROI. I was really fortunate to have a CEO who believed and supported those kind of different ambitious projects.
Awesome. Alex, it was a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you so much.